My provocation is that most advertising is bad today because agencies and the people in them aren't good at getting great ideas made.
Hi, I'm Neil Perkin, the host of Think with Google Firestarters. And Firestarters is a series of insightful conversations with the interested and the interesting of the marketing, advertising, and innovation communities. And today I'm lucky enough to be speaking with Jason Oke. So Jason is the Global Client President and Integrated Client Leader at Dentsu. And he leads on some of Dentsu's largest global clients. So Jason, I'm going to hand over to you if you want. Welcome to Firestarters, first of all, and let me ask you to introduce yourself and also to ask what is your provocation for the Firestarters audience.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for having me. It is so great to talk to you. I think we've known each other online for close to 20 years, probably. And so thank you very much for having me here. And thank you for triggering my imposter syndrome, because Firestarters has just had so many great guests over the years. It's like a who's who of the people I admire and steal from the most in this industry. Your online series has just been brilliant. So I hope I don't bring down the average. My provocation is that most advertising is bad today because agencies and the people in them aren't good at getting great ideas made. And I can dive into why I think that's true and how I think we can start to address that. But I thought I would talk a little bit about my background first, because I think it's helpful context for sort of how I've arrived at where I am and how I've arrived at this point of view. As you said, I'm a senior client leader right now. I kind of run large global pieces of business, integrated teams, client relationships. I've been doing that for over a decade now, first at WPP and now at Dentsu. But I'm actually a planner or a strategist by background and by upbringing. That was what I was trained in. And what I did for the first 15 or 20 years of my career. And because of my strategy upbringing, I think I look at client relationships through the lens of a strategist rather than through the lens of an account people. I actually often tell people I'm the worst account person because I never got trained how to do that. I can't do a contact report or a billing report to save my life. And when I first got asked to do this job, I actually had a lot of imposter syndrome, thinking, I don't know how to manage a client relationship. I don't know how to lead a piece of business. But I reached out to some other people who had been planners who'd moved into agency leadership positions and asked for some advice. I think it was Rob White from Zeus Jones, who gave me a brilliant piece of advice where he said, don't try to be something that you're not. Take the skills that you've learned as a planner and just apply them with a different lens. And it was incredibly helpful advice, partly because it helped me get over my imposter syndrome in that moment and think maybe I can do this job, but also because it is actually really good advice to be a good client partner and lead these relationships. The things that you learn as a planner are things like what makes consumers tick, what makes people buy things, what are the insights, behind why people do the things that they do in the world. And, I started thinking about that from the perspective of what are the insights behind what makes our clients tick, what makes them buy things, because at the end of the day, they're buying things from you as an agency. And so I just wanted to give a bit of that context. I think the other thing that's important is I spent a decade overseas. I lived in Asia for a while, and then I lived in Europe for a while. As you can probably hear from my accent, I'm from North America. I grew up in Canada. I live in the US now in New York. But that means I've gotten to work in many different cultures with many different people around the world. I worked in India and China and Myanmar and Africa and the Middle East and Russia, Eastern Europe, and France and Germany and on and on. And that's taught me about how different working cultures operate, and that not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody makes decisions the same way. Not everybody comes to agreement the same way. Not everyone debates the same way. And culture really informs how people make decisions. And so that sort of helped me think about what is the culture of an organization, what's the decision-making process like, and what are the kind of insights behind what makes people tick in different organizations. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how ideas move through organizations and what are the conditions when good ideas thrive and get better versus the times that I think we've all lived through when ideas get worse. They get watered down, they get whittled down. Sometimes they become Frankenstein ideas where, different things are smushed together that weren't intended to go together. And I don't just mean that in the creative sense of, a creative idea. I think that's true in media, right? A media plan or an innovation in media. There's creativity in everything, SEO and a technology implementation, really anything an agency does. So I'm using idea in the sort of broadest sense here. But I think, unfortunately, the situations where things get kind of watered down and we all sort of limp into the finish line are probably more common than the times where an idea gets stronger through that process and gets better. And I love the concept, Nicholas Taleb's concept of anti-fragility, right? How do you create a situation where something gets stronger as it gets challenged, and something thrives from getting feedback and getting pushed in different directions. And that's something I don't think agencies are very good at, to be perfectly honest. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this today.
Yeah, there's so much in what you're saying there. I mean, it's really interesting because I think you've said before now that it's not that the agencies perhaps are bad at coming up with good ideas, that there are, they're filled with brilliant people, they come up with great ideas every day, but there's perhaps this lack of understanding of how to get them into an organization in a way that are getting them more likely to be signed off. So tell me a bit more about what you think the challenge is there for agencies to get ideas signed off, to get really different or breakthrough ideas signed off. What's the big challenge here?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, I don't think it's not a new idea to say that output of our industry is terrible. And I think it's almost cliche to say advertising is clutter, and we have to break through the clutter. Every agency talks about that without really acknowledging that we're the ones creating the clutter in the first place as well. And it's not, as you just said, it's not because we're lacking in talent, right? I'm surrounded by brilliant writers and brilliant art directors and brilliant account people, brilliant producers, brilliant planners. They're in every agency, right? I watch people come up with brilliant ideas every day. So I think the issue is the process of moving those ideas through an organization. That's what makes the difference between brilliance and wallpaper. And to get to your question about what that comes from, I loved how Ian Fitzpatrick in his Firestarters episode talked about how what we believe shapes what we deliver, how we behave. It's such a great way of thinking about things. And he was thinking about things in terms of the products that we make, the apps or the websites or the creative campaigns that we make, and what we believe about consumers and how that shapes things. But I think it's true too in terms of what we believe about our clients, what we believe about the agency-client relationship. I think that really profoundly shapes what we make as well, and how we communicate it, how we sell it, how we take it through organizations. And so I have a few kind of sub-provocations. One is I think we don't listen to our own marketing advice that we give to clients when it comes to selling to them. The second thing is I think we don't respect our clients a lot of the time. I think we need to learn how to love our clients and get past the sort of us versus them mentality that takes hold of a lot of agency-client relationships, both on the agency side and on the client side. But I also think we need to learn how to love ourselves again. I think there's often a lot of insecurity in agencies, and I think that seeps into these relationships, that people don't necessarily really believe in what they're doing, or don't believe that their ideas are great, or don't believe it's going to make a difference in the world. And if you kind of go in thinking that it's not going to make a difference, it's not surprising that wallpaper comes out the other end. So I can talk about each one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to dive into each one of those, because there's some really interesting kind of thoughts and provocations in there. I'm going to start with the last one, if I may, about this point about agencies perhaps and not having enough confidence perhaps in what they do, and belief in their work. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a bunch of different things. I think a lot of advertising is bad and gets singled out. The marketing world has obviously wrought havoc on the attention economy, as it's called, and people being addicted to screens and all these kinds of things. I think a lot of people in agencies are sort of profoundly uncomfortable with the role that they may have played in late stage capitalism and things like that. And I think that seeps into people don't feel like they're adding real value to the world. They don't feel like they're adding real commercial value to our clients' organizations and their businesses. I think maybe many people don't like capitalism to begin with, right? They, I think a lot of people in agencies maybe, don't actually, would like to have a more equitable world, for example, or things like that. And, maybe they don't believe in the products that they're selling, or the fact that, that we need as much marketing as we do. I think many people in agencies wish that they were authors or filmmakers or entrepreneurs and kind of are doing advertising with maybe a sense of shame. But all of that means I think too often we don't really believe in what we're selling. We don't believe in our idea. We don't believe it'll make an impact. We don't believe any of this actually matters. And, maybe we're too caught up in our own agency dynamics as well. We're kind of trying to get through the next meeting, or trying to, get through our billable hours for the month, or trying to, finish the project deliverables so we can get on to the next project. I worked with a creative director once who, we would present 3 or 4 ideas, and the clients would say, well, what's your recommendation? And only half jokingly, he would say, whichever one you hate the least. And, I think we've ended up with this dynamic where we're selling something we don't really believe in, and our clients can sense that. We talk a lot about we're in the sort of, VUCA world, right? Volatility and uncertainty. And what do clients need from their partners in an environment like that is partly confidence, right? They actually want us to think we have charted a path for you through this uncertainty. We have done our homework. We have been rigorous in our thinking, and we have brought you something that will transform your business in this moment of uncertainty, right? And I think that it's hard for agencies to do that sometimes because, we're just as uncertain about the future as anyone. And, but at the same time, I think we need to figure out how to go forward with that kind of swagger and that self-belief. How often would agencies be willing to put their payment on the line because they believe in an idea so strongly? Or, how often will we be willing to not take no for an answer and go back and fight for an idea over and over again? Because even though the client said no, we know that this idea is going to drive outsized business success, right? And again, I know it sounds like I'm talking about creative, but I really mean this in the broadest sense, whether it's a SEO campaign or a media plan or whatever it is. I think everything can be creative, and everything's about taking leaps that have never been tried before to get an unfair advantage. And so, here's the thing. I love what I do. I passionately love this industry, and I wish people did that more, right? Otherwise, why would we be here? I passionately believe in the value of advertising, the value of brands to drive business, to shape culture, to create economic value and social value, commercial value, create a positive impact in the world. I think when we're at our best, we are able to do all of those things. And I think we get a job where we get paid to have a front seat on all the changes that are happening in culture and media and technology. And I think it's amazing. I feel so lucky to have this job. And I think if you have that attitude, then you can kind of bring that optimism and that energy and that confidence into the work. And that's what clients are looking for from us. I think what we do is an incredible privilege, but what do they say in Spider-Man? With great privilege comes great responsibility.
Yeah, I love your point about sort of competence and confidence is what I'm hearing there, and also about your creativity being not just about the creative, but also lots of different versions of how you can be creative, of course, in that relationship. I think I've seen you write about how creativity is a force multiplier for business growth. So are you kind of really talking about how agencies should really have that belief at the heart of what they're presenting to clients?
Absolutely. What we do should be a competitive advantage, right? That is what we are in the business. We are in the business of trying to help our clients have an outsized impact in their industry, right? And to do that, you have to have a point of view on the world. You have to have a point of view on, your audience that you're trying to reach. You have to understand what's most compelling or interesting or relevant about your brand and how it solves a problem in people's lives. You have to really have done your homework, right? It's not the kind of thing you can kind of, bang out the night before a meeting. But I think if we've done that homework, if we've done that work, we should have that confidence to think, yes, this can be a force multiplier for this business. This can transform their trajectory. And help them move forward in an uncertain world. But yeah, I often talk about how I think creativity should be a force multiplier, right? It shouldn't just be about how much money that you have to spend as a brand. It should be about using a thought that no one else has had, a way of operating in the world that no one else has thought of to be able to create that outsized impact.
And just moving on to one of the other things that you mentioned earlier was about the kind of relationship between the client and the agency, and how sometimes the dynamic is not sort of set up in the right way. Perhaps there's not that kind of healthy, mutually sort of healthy relationship. Perhaps tell me a bit more about what your kind of practical kind of ways of setting up relationships in ways that are healthy. What does that look like?
Absolutely. Because I think we've all lived in this sort of us versus them mentality where, we all talk behind each other's backs. Oh, these clients are idiots. They don't have a creative bone in their body. They don't understand anything. And I'm sure the clients are saying the same thing. Oh, these, agency people don't understand our business. They're selling us stuff that they don't understand the dynamics that we're dealing with or what's important to us. Matt Locke, in your recent Firestarter episode, I loved his rules for content development. And as I was listening to it, it struck me that they're great rules for understanding our clients too, right? So like Matt talked about, you have to start with your audience, understand your audience. What does their day look like? And honestly, I try to do that with my clients. Like, it's a great exercise to do with them. What do they do all day, right? You see them for an hour. What else are they doing all day? What are you competing with for their attention? Where are they coming from, right? If they're coming into a meeting with you after being beaten up by their CFO, like what kind of headspace are they going to be in? How open are they going to be to an idea, especially if it's maybe a provocative idea, a risky idea, a brave idea? You're going to tell them, oh, we got to be courageous and brave. And, they just came from 3 hours of getting beaten up about the P&L and told we have to be conservative, right? So, thinking about the context that they live in, and then thinking about how can you create an environment that will be more favorable or more, where they can be more open-minded to your ideas. So like, are they more open when they're in your office, for example, when they come to the agency versus when they're in their office, maybe, to make sure they've carved out some time to really be present in this meeting, and not be sort of multitasking and coming from one and thinking about the next meeting, right? What's the meeting that they have afterwards, right? Because if they're going to go present to their CEO right after your meeting, maybe they're not going to be fully present and thinking about it. Also things like, where are they in their career? How safe is their job right now? How are they going to earn their bonus? What's going to get them fired? What's going to get them promoted? What are their pain points? Again, it's sort of taking all the lens that we would put on a consumer and how they make their choices, but thinking about it from the lens of what makes this person tick as a client. And even like, what shows do they like? What movies do they like, right? Like when what makes them laugh? What music do they like? What makes them come alive, right? And then what's the kind of vision for this company? What's their vision for the marketing department and how it fits within this company, right? If you can show how the ideas that you're bringing them will help them achieve their goals and their KPIs, that's a great place to start. If you can show them how it connects to something that they love in their own life, that's a great place to start, right? I think sometimes we have, I call it the like magician school of creativity. We think we can show up and be like, ta-da, look at this brilliant idea, and everyone's going to stand up and start applauding. And it's not like that, right? Sometimes people need to go on a journey. They need to be convinced why this is the right idea, and they need to understand the context that it sits in, and maybe how it connects to the Netflix show that they're watching that they love, or how it connects to what their CEO talked about in the last earnings call, right? And so we had a breakthrough once with a client who we realized was spending all of her time thinking about her internal approvals process. She wasn't actually really thinking about how the work would perform in the market, how consumers would react to it. She was so worried about how she would explain the ideas to her boss or to her CEO. And so she really couldn't think past the next meeting, right? She was kind of, we were presenting stuff to her and thinking, oh, she's going to think this is brilliant. But she was really thinking like, oh, how am I going to share this internally? So when we sort of realized what was going on, we started packaging up sales narratives for her. Here's how you can explain this idea internally. Here's how you can explain it in a way that will resonate with what we know your CEO cares about, because he just talked about this at an investor conference last week or whatever it is, right? And so sort of giving them the tools to be successful within their organization, right? I'll give you one other example. We recently, Dentsu won the T-Mobile business in the US, large mobile phone carrier owned by Deutsche Telekom. And so a huge account. When Ad Age wrote about it, they said this might be the biggest account win of the year already in Q1. And during the pitch I wasn't involved in this, so I'm kind of singing the praises of people in the agency, and I wasn't responsible for it. But during the pitch process, somebody had the insight that one of the things the clients cared about most was their retail stores. We're sort of giving them brand ideas, but what they really care about is like where people buy the phones. They care about that last mile very, very much. So we built a T-Mobile store in our office. So when we presented the ideas, we actually could say, here, now walk over here and walk into this T-Mobile store so you can see what these ideas will look like at retail. Here's what it'll look like on your cash register. Here's what it will look like on that giant wall of phones where people come in and try to decide what phone to buy. Here's how we would train your staff to talk about this brand idea and this proposition, right? And it showed them we understood what was most important to them. Right? Not just like, hey, we're going to make a 90-second anthemic film and everyone's going to love it. Right? It was about like, how does this actually live in the world that you live in? And so that, it's empathy, it's understanding, it's all the things that, we think about doing with consumers. How do you do that with clients?
Yeah, love that. It's such a great example, that T-Mobile example. I was actually involved myself with a piece of work with the IPA, the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising in the UK, which was all about how to build mutually sustainable client and agency relationships. And a couple of the key things to come out of that research was, one, the importance of trust. Sounds obvious, but actually the ability of trust to be a kind of superpower when it comes to building, mutually sustainable kind of client agency relationships. And the other one was actually how you set it up right at the beginning. So just getting it right from the beginning. So I'd love to get your perspective on this idea of mutual sustainability. How can you make it work for the agency and for the client at the same time? How can you create that trust right from the beginning? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it starts with learning their business as well as or better than they know it. Like it always amazes me how few people in agencies do things like listen to the client's earnings calls or listen to, how they talk at an investor conference, learn what's important to their business. Also things like, actually going and working on the front lines, right? If you have a supermarket client, maybe go and ask, can I work at the deli counter for a few days and understand like, how consumers, can I stock shelves? We have the American Express business globally at Dentsu. It's one of the businesses I've been running for the last little while. And when we first won the American Express business, this is before my time, the entire team went and spent time in one of their call centers to actually hear people calling in and what problems they had, or they didn't understand how to use this benefit, or, can I have a little bit more time to pay my bill, or whatever it was. And that really helped us to understand sort of what role this brand played in people's lives and how important things like your credit limit is to sort of like, oh, geez, I have to make a big purchase. What's this going to bring? It sort of teaches you the emotion that's kind of hard to get sometimes from just reading a client brief. So developing that kind of understanding and that empathy, and showing that you're willing to spend time in their world, and not just, I'm reading the award shows annuals all day long, or I'm worried about what we're going to present at Cannes this year or whatever. Like, that we spend so much time in our world. And I think that shows to clients sometimes. They're like, oh, you guys kind of care about the agency dynamics sometimes. You care about your own silos, your own specializations, you care about your own award shows, things like that, more than you care about their world. And so I think trust often starts with, how do we show up and show that we're unafraid to spend time in their world and we care about their world. And look, empathy sounds touchy-feely, but it can also, I can mean it in a slightly Machiavellian way too. Like, I'm also talking about how do we use their emotions and what drives them to, help get decisions made. And I think, when it's done well, that can actually help to make great things happen. Have you ever heard the story about how the Dove campaign for Real Beauty kind of got sold through Unilever? It's one of my favorite stories. And again, had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have.
There's if I can go on a little tangent. So I think the brand director's name was Sylvia Lagnado. And she was the kind of the global head of the Dove brand at the time. And she and Ogilvy, came up with this idea about campaign for real beauty. This is probably 20, 25 years ago now. And I think we're so used to purpose-led ideas and things like that right now, but that was really the first one. And so it was really a huge leap of faith for a company to go from selling soap by talking about, how pure the bar of soap was, or, what it does for your skin, to talking about we're going to be a force for changing people's perceptions about beauties. and they got a lot of pushback within the organization, right? A lot of the senior people thought, maybe we should just talk about our soap. And Sylvia tells this story, so I've heard her share it publicly, about how she was so convinced that this was the right idea that she wasn't going to take no for an answer. And one of the things that they did is when they were going in to present to the Unilever board, beforehand, they had secretly gone to all of the board members' houses. And, the Unilever board at the time was all kind of 50-year-old men. And so they'd gone to all of their houses and interviewed their teenage daughters and their wives about how they felt about their bodies and how they felt about the beauty industry and everything. And so a way of setting up this idea in the boardroom was actually by showing them their own families talking about these ideas. And you had these men kind of crying and going, I had no idea, right? So, having that kind of empathy to sort of get into people's lives and be unafraid to get into people's lives can sometimes, it can be a weapon in your arsenal. It's not just about being touchy-feely. It really can be a weapon to sort of get people to see the power of an idea and the value of an idea. But anyway,
that's an amazing story. I love that story. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. I mean, it really sort of brings to life actually about the ability to just really understand how to sell in an idea. And it just strikes me that, advertising is all about selling, and marketing is all about selling. And yet, agencies themselves seem to be quite bad at selling to clients in some ways.
Well, it's funny, again, kind of coming from a perspective of a strategist. Like, what do we tell our clients all the time? Like, the world doesn't care about your RTB. They don't care about your new bottle of mustard that you're launching or your new credit card benefit or whatever it is. Don't start with a feature, start with people, start with your audience, start with the problem that your customer is solving. What's the job to be done? What are their unmet needs, right? That's like week one as a strategist. You learn to ask all of those questions and then to challenge your clients to ask those questions as you're writing the brief and coming up with the strategy. Be the voice of the consumer, be people first, all these things. But when it comes to selling ourselves as an agency, I think we forget all of that. We get lost in our own processes, our own silos, our own RTBs, right? Think about a new business pitch, right? The first 30 slides are all about ourselves, right? Look at our global reach. Look at our unique process. Look at our, all these charts with different geometric shapes on them, right? There was actually a great Ad Age article a couple of weeks ago by somebody who said that they got access to see like 8 different agencies' pitch decks, and they were all virtually the same, right? Each agency talking about how different they are and how unique their process is. And if you covered up the logos, you honestly couldn't tell one from another. They were all basically the same. And so we forget to sort of take our own medicine, if you will, to sort of think about, like, again, how is this idea going to create value in my client's life, right? In their company, what are their unmet needs, right? Like, start with the people first that you're across the table from, and think about what they need, how they're going to get bonused, how they're going to, become famous in their organization, what's going to get them promoted, what it is, and spend a little less time, I think, being self-involved. Right. We probably all have told the story, like, brands can be like a person at a party. Don't be the person who's talking about themselves all the time. Be the person who's interested in other people, right? But agencies are like that too. We spend all our time talking about ourselves, it feels like. Or, we're chasing the latest shiny new tech, whether it's Gen AI or AR or VR or Web 3.0 or whatever it's going to be next week. We're focused on our own awards and our own processes and tools. We're focused on our own silos and specializations within agencies, right? We spend so much time trying to find the right person in an agency or getting another part of the agency to cooperate. We're focused on ourselves and just not enough on our clients. And I think that's just, it's a truism that I think is at the core of a lot of relationships. And the more, it's like any relationship, it's like in a romantic relationship, the more you can be focused about the other person and, really have their best interests in heart and show that you care about them and you care the things they care about. That is the way to build that kind of trust and to get out of our own way.
I'm interested. You mentioned earlier about how ideas move through an organization,
yeah.
And I guess one perspective on that is about the role of marketing within an organization, yeah. And some have said that marketing as a function has actually decreased, perhaps in its sort of power or the influence that it has within the organization. Maybe less CMOs sitting on boards, whatever. I mean, do you think that's the case, number one? But also, when you're thinking about marketers selling in an idea and making it live and breathe within an organization through every touch point, any kind of advice there for helping marketers to do that?
Well, I think as with anything, there's some truth to that. And I've certainly have seen some CEOs get sort of, less power in their organization over time, get demoted even, not being the C-suite anymore. Maybe they report to a COO or somebody else within the company. And so, yeah, I do absolutely believe that is the case. But at the same time, you also have a trend of a lot of CMOs starting to have their title changed to become chief growth officer, for example, or, chief revenue officer, things like that. And there's some hand wringing about people saying, oh, what does this mean? Marketing's losing its importance. I think that means marketing's growing in its importance. That, these people are now being recognized for driving growth, for driving revenue, that, those skills that they've brought and the marketing teams that they've built are not just creating pretty pictures or, creating pretty packaging or whatever it is, but they're creating value, economic value within the company, right? So I think, there is some truth to the fact that marketing in some circles, I think, might be losing value. But I think the great marketers are the ones who are able to show the connection between marketing and, commercial success. And so, when I'm talking with clients about how they can be successful in their own C-suite, in their own company, that's one of the things we talk about is, how do you take all the great work that the IPA has done, for example, about showing how creativity drives business success? And, how do you tell what's that narrative that you tell internally about the role of marketing and how creativity can be a force multiplier, how creativity can drive growth, how marketing can, give you an unfair advantage. But I sat with one CMO a couple of years ago and went through an exercise much like we've just been talking about and sort of thought, like, who's your audience? Like, what's your CEO like? What's your CFO like? And so she actually used some examples like of talking, using financial terminology to talk about brand value, and said, there's the difference between, your cash balance and then talking about your kind of, your stock price or your, the equity that you built up in your company, right? And, marketing is not just about your cash balance, about how much money you're spending or how much money you're taking in today. It's about your equity that you're building up, in the longer term. And great marketing drives both of those. So she was able to sort of take some insights into the audience that she was talking to, because, her CEO and her CFO and her COO all came from financial backgrounds. So she was able to talk about the value of marketing using the language that they understood. And it really helped. It helped her unlock additional budgets and get more kind of confidence in marketing in that organization.
I love that sort of thinking about who their audience is within the organization. I mean, there's this sort of phrase which has been used quite a bit about moving upstream and how agencies should really aim to move up. I mean, do you think that is valid? First of all,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the strongest relationships that I've been involved in, when clients do get the sense that you understand their business and you understand, what drives growth and what drives commercial value, those are when you get invited to other conversations. Like I mentioned, I've been involved in running the American Express business relationship that we have globally. And probably half of our global relationship now is actually not in advertising. It's in like strategic consulting, helping them come up with new products and new services, helping them understand, how innovation is happening in the financial category and what they need to do to keep up with, fintech companies, for example, or some of the sort of non-traditional players. But we even help them kind of navigate their own internal companies. So we actually create like sales enablement kits, for example. So you have this new product or you have this new service. How do your sales teams then go out and sell it to, their customers? So American Express is selling to small and medium and large size corporations, for example, with their business cards. So we help them come up with that kind of stuff. So we do a lot of sort of non-traditional marketing stuff. We do MarTech implementations to kind of help them understand, what sort of technology they're going to need to be able to do more personalization in the future. But you don't get invited into those conversations unless you've shown that you understand their business, you understand how they make money, you understand the dynamics and the forces that are being put on them by the world right now, and show that you have a vision of where they could be in the next 3 or 5 years, and you also have the capabilities and the competence, like you referred to earlier, that can help them get there. But yeah, I think the best relationships are the ones where you naturally get invited into those conversations. You're not kind of fighting to get in there. You're naturally getting, because they're like, wow, you have a point of view on my company, you have a point of view on this industry, you have a point of view on the commercial dynamics. We'd love to invite you to some of these other conversations.
And does that mean that agencies need to expand their footprint, outside of marketing into other, not just customer-facing areas, but also with maybe the CFO and even other areas of it is. So you're really looking to expand your footprint beyond marketing inside the organization, yeah?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I mean, that's to come back to sort of my job, right? As a kind of integrated client leader, or global client leader at WPP and now at Dentsu, a big part of the job is thinking about all of the different things that an agency, that a holding company offers, and how can we bring all of these things together: media and technology and data, creativity, and on and on. And when you start bringing all those things together, the conversations naturally expand, right? Because you're not just talking to a CMO anymore. You're also talking to IT. You're talking to procurement. You're talking to global operations. You're talking to global supply chain people. You end up having these broader conversations. And so you have to start understanding the different language that they speak, right? And if you can become like a universal translator that actually helps different parts of our client organizations talk to each other, because they have these problems too, right? The marketers sometimes don't know how to talk to the IT people, right? And they have their own silos that they're trying to break down. One of the best compliments that I've heard paid to agencies is when they say, you understand our company better than we do, and you're able to be that connector and that translator to connect dots that maybe we don't even see those dots, but you're able to see them because you're talking to IT, and you're talking to procurement, and you're talking to operations, and you're talking to supply chain, and you're talking to marketing, and you start seeing how all these things come together. If you can get to that place, then it's a great place to be, because then you are actually, further upstream, but you're also creating, I think, a different kind of economic value. And so, with American Express, for example, we're in this position where sometimes we're helping them shape and create a new product, a new innovation, a new offering, a new feature, benefit, whatever it is. And then, so, when it's time for the marketing to communicate about it, hey, we're launching a new product, or we're launching a new service, we're not just getting a brief for the first time. We've been involved already for maybe 2 years, helping them shape that. And so we understand the trade-offs, we understand the nuances, we understand some of the legal dynamics behind it, about what you can say and what you can't say. And so that helps us to hit the ground running, because maybe it's the same strategist who's actually been involved in that whole journey, who's now briefing a creative team, and or maybe the creative team has been involved because they helped to name the product, right? So all of a sudden, it's not just that you've opened the aperture to have different kinds of conversations. I think it also makes you better as an agency, because you're not getting a baton handed to you that maybe a consulting company did or something like that, right? It's the same kind of core group of people who have been involved in shepherding this thing from kind of idea to boardroom to execution to then seeing what it looks like out in the world.
Yeah. Jason, we're running short on time, unbelievably, but I'd love to just ask a bit more about that integration as my final question, because I think one of the things that I've seen you write about before is about how integration can sound complex, but it's really just about people. And you as a integrator, bringing together, the best of an agency group's capability with a huge global organization, that's got to be some integration job. So tell me a bit about any advice you've got on that people aspect of integration.
Yeah, I mean, I think every agency and every holding company has wrestled with this and struggled with this. And so you end up in a lot of conversations about process, right? About, incentives sometimes, about, do we bonus people differently based on how they work together, or how they're growing the overall revenue of the agency, not just their little slice of whatever their specialty is. But one of my observations has been the best process in the world, or the best incentives in the world, or whatever, won't overcome if you don't have the right people. And I think integration requires a certain mindset. And so that's why when I talk about it, it's as much about people as it is about process or anything else. It's about finding people who are curious, finding people who are generous, right? Who actually want all of us to be smarter than any of us. who know that maybe, you know, they're not going to be able to solve the world's complex problems all by themselves. Look, agencies obviously have a lot of egos in them as well. I think there are a lot of people who would love to be the smartest people in the room, or, you know, to be the white knight riding in to save the day. But we live in such a world of kind of complexity, and all of the best ideas today, I think, require more than one person or more than one team. They require media understanding, they require technology understanding, they require data understanding, they require creative thinking, you know, and then they require expertise in you know, PR, and expertise in, you know, retailing, all of these different things, right? No one person can do that, right? Even the best T-shaped person in the world is not going to be able to do all of those things. And so you have to have people who can put their ego aside and realize that, like, the more curious and the more open they can be, and the more generous they can be with bringing in other people, whether that means sharing revenue, like literally being generous, because within an agency, sometimes you're sharing revenue. I have a certain amount for this project, and maybe I don't keep it all. Maybe I'm sharing it with other people. But, you know, people who can have that mentality, I think if you have a team full of those people, the process almost doesn't matter. And the incentives almost don't matter, because those people are wired to solve problems in a different way and to work together in a different way. So that's what I mean when I say it's integration is as much about people as it is about process or anything else.
I'm going to sneak in one last question, if I may, because let's say, you know, if you're a new account person or a planner coming into an agency and you're moving on to an account for the first time, what would be your 3 pieces of advice to give to that sort of young person in the industry to really set the relationship up in the right way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it'll come back to 3 of the things we've talked about. One is fall in love with this industry. You know, we are so lucky. We get to sit at the intersection of art and commerce and technology and culture and media, all things that are constantly shifting and changing, and we get paid to think about it. We get paid to shape it, right? And so, you know, don't get cynical. I think our industry has a lot of people who get cynical and you know, maybe think that what they're doing isn't important. But I think, you know, keeping that optimism and that energy that I think young people come into the industry with, if you can figure out how to keep that and fuel that fire, I think that's the first thing to start. The second thing is to develop that kind of radical empathy for your clients, right? We are all in this together. We can't make things without them. We can't create anything without them. And so don't think about it as an us versus them thing. We're like, oh, I'm trying to, you know, push something over through their organization, and I'm trying to fight with them, right? Stop thinking about yourself, stop talking about yourself, and listen. Their jobs are hard. They are doing their best. Their incentives are often not great. Like, I'm not sure I would actually want to be a brand manager at a lot of big companies, right? They're tough jobs. But the more you can understand their lives and their loves and their fears and you know, what kind of makes them tick, I think that will make us all better. And then the third thing is listen to your own advice, right? Don't just show your ideas. Don't just talk about the agency's output, but think about how does it solve a problem for your clients? How does it actually create commercial value? And how do you help your clients talk about it in a way that their own organization will embrace and see the value of?
Fantastic words of wisdom there, Jason. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time being part of Firestarters. For those watching or listening, don't forget to subscribe and to share if you've enjoyed this episode. There are also more episodes up on the YouTube channel, and of course, on the big podcasting platforms. But my thanks again to Jason Oke. Thank you, Jason. Great to have you as a guest on Firestarters.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for having me.